Okay, so let's talk about the six most mysterious unsolved murders of all time. This is an article by Melissa Chan from Time.com. Murders are always disturbing, but some are even worse than that. These murders were brutal and unimaginable in their depravity. The crimes horrified communities and stumped police, leaving questions that lingered for decades afterwards. As years passed without an arrest or even a credible suspect. Time magazine takes a look back at some of the most high profile murders from the past 150 years. They vary in their details, but they all have one thing in common: a killer who's never been found. Number one, Jack the Ripper, terrorized London. London's most notorious serial killer prowled the East End over a century ago, prying on prostitutes and terrorizing the area. He made his mark as Jack the Ripper by killing at least 5 women. Dread grew as the dead bodies began to pile up near each other within a 3-month period in 1888. The neighborhood was horrified to a degree bordering on panic when the news broke of a second female victim. The Morning Post reported at the time the local newspaper called the killing barbarous and said the manner of the murder was too horrible for description. Local authorities at first wondered whether the suspect was a butcher or a doctor. The victims of the so-called Whitechapel murders, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, were dumped on the streets, according to author David Yost, who explores the 5 deaths in his Elizabeth Stride and Jack the Ripper book. The FBI, which analyzed the case in 1988, at the behest of a movie production company, said each victim was known to be a heavy drinker and a prostitute. They were all targeted because they were readily accessible and were killed swiftly in the early morning hours. Even with all eyes on the case, police were never able to put a face to the killer. The FBI said local investigations were stymied because forensic technology and other advanced means of thoroughly investigating homicides were non-existent at the time. The National Archives obtained letters exchanged between different law enforcement bosses in 1888 that depicted overwhelmed police departments. Charles Warren, who was the chief commissioner of the Metropolitan Police at the time, asked for help from the City of London Police. We are inundated with suggestions and names of suspects, Warren wrote. Countless historians and criminologists, both amateur and professional, have speculated on the killer's identity. But it appears Jack the Ripper took his secret to the grave. The Black Dahlia, grisly death captures headlines. The sight stopped a mother and her child in their tracks. A woman was lying feet from the sidewalk. The now infamous slaying of 22-year-old Elizabeth Short instantly captured headlines in 1947, with newspapers later dubbing her the Black Dahlia, in part because she had dark hair and an apparent preference for dark clothing. Elizabeth Short, a Massachusetts native who had come to California in pursuit of fame. It's unclear how the aspiring actress met such a grisly fate. Several dozens of people have claimed credit for the high-profile crime. The FBI, which helped local authorities investigate at the time, said it ran record checks on potential suspects and conducted interviews across the nation. However, none of the confessors appeared to be telling the truth, and the case has gone unsolved. The murder became the subject of a 1987 novel, followed by a 2006 movie starring Hilary Swank. The Los Angeles Police Department told Time recently that it is still investigating the cold case, although it did not provide any details. It's an unsolved case. There are no additional information per the detectives. The Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer was no ordinary murderer. Rather than avoiding the spotlight, he craved media attention and seemed to enjoy taunting police with cryptic notes and clues he left behind. The Zodiac Killer murdered 5 people, seemingly at random, in Northern California in 1968 and 1969. He claimed in letters to the police that there were a dozen more victims, although that was never confirmed. His deadly rampage began in December 1968, when 2 teenagers were shot to death in a parking lot. About 7 months later, another 2 people were shot in a parked car, although one survived. That's when local newspapers started getting letters from someone anonymously claiming to be responsible for the slayings, according to the San Francisco Examiner, which had received the cryptic notes. The newspaper said the letters contained coded messages explaining the killer's motive, as well as a key to help readers decipher his identity. Authorities did not crack the code revealing his name, and the Zodiac Killer went on to stab 2 more people in late September. One of the victims survived and the other died. About 2 weeks later, the killer struck again, fatally shooting a 29-year-old taxi driver, according to the Examiner. Days later, the Zodiac mailed a piece of his latest victim's shirt to the Chronicle newspaper. To this day, no suspects have been confirmed in the case. The San Francisco Police Department said the investigation is ongoing. Tupac Shakur and Notorious B.I.G. The music world was rocked in the late 1990s when rap superstars Tupac Shakur and the Notorious B.I.G. were gunned down about 6 months apart. The killings came at a moment marked by intense rivalry between their competing record labels. Both rappers were the top artists of their record companies. Many said the murders were a sign music feuds had gone too far. Shakur was killed first in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas on September 13, 1996. At the time, the 25-year-old superstar's Death Row record label had been feuding with its competitor, Bad Boy. 6 months later, Bad Boy's Christopher Wallace better known as the Notorious Biggie Smalls, or Biggie, was killed in a similar fashion. The rapper was fatally shot in a drive-by as he was leaving a music industry party in Los Angeles. The two superstars had been friends when both were signed under Bad Boy, according to the FBI, which investigated Biggie's murder, but closed the case in 2005. The pals grew distant after Tupac landed in jail over convictions that included rape, and Biggie rose in popularity. Tupac later switched over to death row. It's unclear whether the rivalry played a role in either killing. Both cases stumped police, in part because of uncooperative witnesses. The murder mysteries amassed their own collection of theories, including an unproven one that claims both rappers are still alive and faked their own deaths.